Dr. DeLoach.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yes,
What?
young Zachary, what can I talk to you about?
Oh my.
My name is Scott DeLoach. I am from a number of places. I was born in Tokyo, Japan. I lived in Georgia, Ohio, Wyoming, Texas, and Kansas, to name a few. I spent my middle school years in Denton, Texas, and then my family moved to Omaha, Nebraska, where I lived for my high school years. Well, I would be in the late 70s period, from 1973 to 1980 would be my teen years. The disco era.
The disco era.
We went to a Southern Baptist church, which was very good at telling you what you ought not do. And it was very much kind of you were expected to do certain things and not expected to do other things because you were a good boy. I mostly grew up in, well, obviously when I was in Texas, in the early teen years, it was the Bible Belt, and so everybody went to church, regardless whether they're Christians or not. And in Omaha, it wasn't quite the community norm, but most people went to church and all my friends went to church. So it was fairly well accepted. Yes, there was a youth group at church, and we did all sorts of silly things. It wasn't incredibly spiritual, but there were a lot of activities. After church, Sunday night church, the teens would go out and we would go to the local diner and sit around and be silly. We had, I don't know, we just did various activities. We'd go to people's houses. We would have, what do you call that? We would have a banquet every year. My senior year, I was Mr. Whatever. I was the male Valentine banquet guy, king, whatever. Yes, that was me.
Congratulations.
Well, the initial president was Richard Milhouse Nixon, who quickly, shortly after my 13th birthday, was sent packing for Gerald Ford. Or I guess, yeah, it would be Gerald Ford. And then on my first time I voted at 18, I voted for Jimmy Carter. So those were the presidents. None of them were outstanding.
No. Would you vote for Jimmy Carter again?
No. Well, Watergate started my teen years. That was something. The Cold War was a big deal. We were fighting the big bad evil Ruskies, and that played, a major part of how international relations were. The gas shortage of the 70s, where we had gas lines, and I remember gas going from less than 50 cents till it hit 50 cents, till shortly later it hit $1, and which is significantly more than what it costs today in real dollars. So the dominant world politics were the Russian or the Soviet, the Soviet-U.S. relations and the Cold War and the détente and all those kind of things that supposedly were trying to keep going on. But I was more concerned with girls.
Huh.
Hank Aaron
Okay.
hit his 715th home run, I remember. The Big Red Machine, Cincinnati Reds were my favorite baseball team, and that's back when baseball was still king, before they did strikes and those kind of things. NFL, it was the Dallas Cowboys. Again, my team.
Yeah.
I think pretty much you see a trend here. But, you know, I had the standard movies. We went to the movies on Friday night, Saturday night.
What were the big movies that you remember going to see?
Star Wars.
Of course.
1977. I remember vividly sitting there in the theater and the crowd erupting when the final scene, when the ball erupted. It was rather exciting.
Yeah.
Those were great special effects back then, by the way. In my late teen years, I was a Billy Joel fan, REO Speedwagon, some of those kind of.
How would your Southern Baptist upbringing view those kinds of artists or movies? Or
Well, watching TV was okay. Playing cards was evil.
of course.
Probably most of the movies I saw would have been considered bad. And at that time there was no real Christian music scene other than, you know, Southern gospel. And they were just as bad then as most of them are. The Gaithers were hip though.
Yes.
They were still very young at that point.
Oh, right. They're still hip and young.
Right. Sports,
Okay.
followed by sports and more sports. Whether it was on TV or going to Nebraska football games or whatever it was, high school sports.
Yeah.
That was it.
Did you ever like watch TV shows together, or was it just sports?
Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley. Yes, there were some good TV shows.
Okay.
I guess the biggest thing was the fashion and the hair, which the hair, I hate to admit it, but I used to wear my hair down to here, and I looked as silly as it sounds. And then of course there was the wonderful clothing of the era, which included very loud, bright colors with pointy collars down to about, well, halfway to your belt. There were just ridiculous clothes that had huge bell-bottom jeans. We wore platform shoes that made us a good 3 to 4 inches taller. So, yes. I don't remember what the question was. Well, my heroes as a teenager were mostly sports stars. Roger Staubach, Pete Rose before he gambled. I think those were probably my two biggest heroes during my teen years.
Any non-sports people?
No. Well, there's my older brother Trey, whose real name is William Arthur DeLoach III, thus the name Trey, or any other name that would be better. Trey was the party animal, football star. All the girls loved him, all the guys loved him, and so I tried to be anything but what he was. Even though I could have been a great sports star, I gave it up to be a bandy and play in the band. Much like my little brother, Steve, or who we affectionately called Stephanie. He was a little wimpier, he was a little smaller, he was 4 years younger than me, so actually we were very good friends, but he was even less athletic and more intellectual than I. My older brother, even though he was a football star and played at Nebraska, he was definitely afraid of me. I beat him up twice.
How many times did he beat you up, though?
I can't remember. No, he was. The family was always following him, doing what, following him to football games or whatever. I was close behind. I was only a year and a half younger than him, so we were kind of in high school at the same time. And, So he and we didn't do all that much together. I played more with my little brother Steve, just because we had imaginations and Trey was too busy running into walls and things like that. Still to this day, when he sees me, he likes to try to tackle me. So that was pretty much his method of showing affection all throughout his life. For today's teenagers, don't worry, you get over it. Life is better after teenhood. No, I guess the biggest advice would be to, actually spend a little time thinking seriously about your future, because that's really where most of life occurs. Even though it seems like it's your teen years, it's all about that's going to be the focus of your life. There's much better things to come: marriage, children, grandchildren, all those kind of things that you really don't think about as a teenager. But well, I mean, obviously, we were steeped in, kind of the religion of the day. He was a Southern Baptist preacher. He was a really cool guy because he never raised his voice, never got upset unless he was in the pulpit, and then he shouted a lot and very loudly. But actually, the biggest influence on my life from a religious standpoint was my grandmother, Gigi, who was the wife of my father, the pastor. She not only knew the Bible, but she applied it in every situation, which to me, it was pretty impressive that she actually lived what we saw. I didn't really spend that much time with my grandfather because he was always busy doing things and going to visit people and help people. Oh, my mom and dad, we talk about it a little bit here and there, but mostly it was left for church, and I never talked about it with my brothers or anything. So.
Unless you have anything else you would like to add.
I would just expect everybody would pick up a good book, like David Copperfield.
Which you've never read.
Which I have never read.